everyone, and welcome to the thru Recovery Life Podcast. Today we have Mike G in Pittsburgh, sharing his experience, strength, and hope with us, and here to tell us what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. So, without further ado, I give you Mike G in Pittsburgh. Go ahead, Mike. All yours.
Thanks so much, John. Hello, everybody. I am an alcoholic. My name is Michael, and it's a real honor to be asked to be a part of this podcast. And indeed, looking forward to sharing my experience, strength, and hope. And my experience is just my experience, and hope that you find something that you can connect with. Through my talk. If not, there are plenty of other folks in recovery that you can find something in common with and hopefully move forward in fellowship with. And I appreciate John as part of my we or my fellowship, somebody with similar ethnic background as mine and similar I think sort of moral standards, at least the ones that I was raised with, and also someone with a similar amount of recovery. So in those ways, I connect and relate to John, and that's what it's all about. I think someone said recently, this is how this started, right? One alcoholic talking to another alcoholic across the kitchen table, and sharing, their pain, and the pain halved helped them to heal. And so this format and meetings are great, but I really find a lot of strength in the personal relationships that I develop with other alcoholics. So let me go back to the beginning just a little bit of my backstory. It's similar to a lot of them. I've lived in Pittsburgh my whole life. I had a father who, I'll say in fairness, was a workaholic. My mother also struggles with OCD, so I was sort of set up for this disease, I'd say, at some level. But things were going okay. Until my early teens, which is also a common story with us alcoholics. A lot of us start early. I was reaching out, I believe, for some attention from my dad. When I didn't get it, I just started to search for that up the street more with my friends and whatnot. And eventually we found ourselves getting into some trouble, found my friend's mom's cigarettes. And, before long, at school, I started to hook up with some new kids in the school who were a little bit faster, a little bit older, a little more experienced, and I gravitated towards them. Up to that point, I'd sort of been the ringleader of my middle school crew, and these new guys wanted to do some more stuff that we had no experience with. So that's how my drinking began. I stole a couple of bottles of beer my dad would stash behind the washer down in the washroom, and I brought them to an evening outing that we were all at, and there's some dry alcohol there as well, and that was my first experience. And my first experience was all that. I was in puberty, and I was having a lot of trouble feeling comfortable and being comfortable in groups of kids and talking to young ladies I was interested in. And that night we drank, and we went down to a big social gathering that was outdoors. It was summertime, probably the summer before 7th grade, I want to say. And we got down there, and there were hundreds of kids there, and I felt perfectly at ease for the first time in a big group like that. I felt like a lot of the noise and the static that I used to experience in groups like that was completely hushed, and I felt again comfortable in my own skin, and that's that feeling that I chased from then on out. Um, and also, one of the other things that I chased as a teenager was just wanting to be involved with people that I felt were popular, right? So these kids they seemed to be popular. I mean, before long, I was hanging out with high school kids and going to high school parties. And when I didn't get invited, I felt uh, inferior. I felt like that's where I wanted to be. I wanted to be at the party that everyone was at. And, I think even at that stage, some of the young men I was hanging out with, I think they experienced my friendship as like, I think the only thing I was interested in at some level were those two things, right? I wanted to be drunk and I wanted to be involved, right? And I think that they, at the time, they may have had a little bit more like balance. I don't know. Maybe I'm making that up, but they noticed that, and I think like I started to get rejected from that group at some level, and so as I did many times in the 10 years that I was out there drinking, I switched peer groups, and I seemed to do that just about every year. My drinking, picked up. I got to the parties I could, the bigger parties that the high school kids were throwing, outdoor parties. I was also I was also partying on my own, sometimes at home, but also I would get in trouble with my parents, who were not at all on the they were not at all okay with what was happening, and when I would get grounded, it would be for these extended periods of time, and then sometimes they would go out, and I would sneak out, and I would just there was nothing. If there was any way that I could be involved socially in the drinking scene in high school, or just on my own, I would be trying to make that happen. And yeah, like I said, by in ninth grade, peer change or friendship change again. I had all these friends that were seniors, and they graduated, and I gone to another group of kids the next year. But I was probably um, not sober. Let's say pretty much every week, and I'll more often than not. Um, by ninth grade in high school. And, that tapered off later in high school. I got involved. One of my saving graces was that I was an athlete. I was a hockey player for my high school. And so that took a lot of time and commitment. And I wanted to be good at that. And I had been playing for a long time, since early in grade school. And so, I focused in on that sort of like in the months that it was happening, October to March. But the other months, and especially over the summer, the only thing that I was really into was trying to be involved with kids who were partying socially, and that was my high school experience, I think, was a lot of with some kids who, some young people who party and drink and drug experience in college. And so, by the time I was a senior, um, I was, every weekend I was probably drunk, and then a lot of weekdays. And, the expectation in my family was that I would go to college. Um, and so when I went to look for a college, I wanted to play hockey. I wanted to go to a good college because I had this wrong perception that I was doing well academically, and I wanted to go to school where there was a lot of partying. So I found all that wrapped up in one university, where I went for 1 year, played hockey, um, partied as much as I could, and set up my academic schedule so that I was done with all my classes by Thursday afternoon. And of course, that helped to facilitate the weekend partying. And they say you can't burn a candle at two ends. Well, you certainly can't burn it at three. And before the end of that year, the university asked me to take a year off and consider my academic uh, progress and intention, and maybe come back later. And that was a good year. I mean, that was sort of like the last good moments of my experience as a drunk. And it might not sound like a good experience, but for me, the promises are a big part of my recovery now, and I do not regret my past in any way. And it was what it was. And so and so again, like that would probably have been sort of like the peak of my experience as a drunk, if you will. And everything was sort of like rolling down the hill after that. Shortly after I got back to Pittsburgh from that university, I found myself, on a work set, asked to leave the work set because I was probably a little bit hungover and acting strangely. When I wouldn't, the cops were called, and because I hadn't actually done anything, they took me to a mental hospital, and that was what would become the first of many stays at that sort of institution for me. They had me fill out a diagnostic. It was like a 500-page question, 500 question document, and I had no interest in filling it out, so I kind of just fill in the blanks. And I'm sure when they put that into the computer to try to determine what my problems were, they must have come back craziest man on the planet. So anyway, my parents, I neglected to mention I was in Ohio at that point on this job, so my parents came down to get me. I would have been like, I don't know, maybe 19, 20. And I remember sitting out in the waiting room and watching them have this conversation, like an adult, serious conversation with the psychiatrist there. And he was probably telling them at that point that he thought that I was schizophrenic, and that, things were only going to get worse from there. And that did not turn out to be the case, but I did feel badly about that later on. And I was, again, one of the rewards of this program, I was able to turn my existence around and heal that experience for my parents. And through the fellowship, I was able to show them that indeed their son was not crazy as they were led to believe, and that what I was just an alcoholic who had a spiritual disease that has a solution within the fellowship and the 12 steps. So they brought me back to Pittsburgh. I wasn't able to live with them, so I moved in with a family friend. From there, another family friend asked me if I wanted to go to an AA meeting. And obviously things were not going as I had foreseen with my college career, and any of my other friends were, moving ahead through their first years successfully. And I wanted to get my stuff together. I still felt like I could be something or do something with my life or whatever, and I was going nowhere. So I was like, I'll go to the meeting. So I went. That was my first experience. I was handed a sponsor. I did not work with that sponsor. That is sort of on that sponsor. I would say he didn't really push me to read in the book or anything like that. So I stuck around for about 6 months. When my friends from college or from high school who were in college came back during the summer, I had no defense. So first chance I got, I was at a concert or something, and I was again, back out drinking and drugging and doing my thing. That eventually led me to another hospitalization, where people felt like I was a danger to myself or others, and that was, sort of how I was ushered into uh, the psych ward again. And there, I dried out for a long time. This was been the early '90s, and at that point they were able to sort of keep you in the hospital for an extended period of time. And what I gained from that was that um, I was able to the experience, and I wasn't conscious of, was that I was actually free from drinking and drugging for several months. And So it could be done, right? I could, whereas, since I had started, drinking back there in seventh grade, I hadn't taken a month off for 10 years. So at any rate, when they let me out, I had always intended to drink. I did so. But at some point, I had sort of that moment of clarity in a bar where I was like, I had this thought, could have been my subconscious, could have been God. Doesn't matter. I had it. And it was like, you don't have to live like this. It's what the voice told me. And that wasn't the only voice I was hearing at that point, but I listened to that one. And because I had the experience in the rooms of AA, I went back there. At that point, I found a young person's meeting, and I also was discovered by a sponsor who was very enthusiastic and asked me if I had a sponsor. And I told him no, and he said he was going to be my sponsor. And so that was how I did not choose my first sponsor. Um, this guy was very enthusiastic for the program and helping people, and he was so enthusiastic. He helped another gentleman who's still a part of Pittsburgh AA with me. We're probably about the same age. We have the same years of sobriety. So I'm 50 years old at this point. We were 25 at that time, or pushing 25. And he's still sober as well and works at the central office. And so my sponsor approached him about sponsorship. And at the time, Mike Z said that he had a sponsor, and our sponsor Gary J told him to fire that guy and that he was going to sponsor him. That was how enthusiastic he was and sure of himself. And he was good at what he did, and what he did was the right thing. And he led us about as a group of young men, and we would this is pre-Zoom, obviously. We would hop in his car and we would drive past about 5 AA meetings to one deep somewhere on the meeting list and out of the way. And in that process, we had a pre-meeting in the car, and we would arrive at the meeting, and he would have us do awkward things like go around the room and shake hands with all of the people in the room that I did not know and who did not look like me, and who were all, just, I don't know, smoking and carrying on their own conversations. And I don't know, it just taught me a little bit about what AA is about, getting out of self, reaching out to others, making people feel welcome, just little principles that the program has. He was good at sort of passing those on to us. And so, we had the meeting then, the regular meeting, and then we had to drive home. And in that process, we had another meeting on the way back with the guys in the car. And so, we did this regularly, several days a week, week in and week out. And started to go through the big book. And there in the big book of AA is where the steps are buried. They're not buried there, but that's where you'll find them. And as you read through it, you sort of come to places where you work them. And I did that with my sponsor, and we did each and every one of them. And we read through the whole book. And I got myself through it with him in about a year. I like to tell one particular story about working step 4 and 5 with him, where I was writing, and I was feeling, real low about myself and feeling depressed. And, in this time, it's sort of long ago, I'm sort of pushing together some of my experiences uh, within recovery and within the institutions that I went to there was an institution there when I was sober for depression, and it may have been around that time. But I was working on the steps as well, and I was seeing a therapist, and all those things were sort of pushing me through and past my 10-year addiction, slowly but surely. But at the time, I was working on my fourth step, and I was feeling real low, suicidal, in fact. And I called him and I said, I don't know what's going on, but I feel like crap. And he's like, "When's the last time you wrote?" And I was like, "It's been a while." And he said, "You're probably done." And so for me, I always encourage people to just write, get it out, get it done, and share it. And so the next step was the fifth step, and I shared my fifth step with him. All of the things that I felt were, my large scale resentments, some of my, smaller personal resentments, my fears, a very short sex inventory, and the other things prescribed in the literature about a fourth step. And he listened and he nodded and he said, he could relate to some things, and that and other things made sense to him, and he could see how I might feel that way, and made me feel comfortable about sharing, all of my innermost secrets and thoughts for the most part. And I never really done that with another person. Um, and The next day, when I left my apartment, I always like to say that I felt like I walked upright for the first time, and I stopped dragging my knuckles. That experience really made me feel like a man for the first time, at the ripe old age of probably like 23. And so we were off and running, still doing the same thing, still going to meetings, still being a part of a regular weekly young persons meeting with about 50 people that would come. I got to really experience life, sober and young, and we were out. We did a lot of things that normal 20 somethings would do. We would go to clubs because we had a reason to be there. If there was dancing or something like that, we would go as a group. And we were sheltered through our connection with each other and through our step work, and it was never an issue. At some point, though, approaching 2 years, he asked me to start sponsoring somebody, and he said the guy would give me a call. And I think that what happened was, the guy probably called me on like a Friday or Saturday, and I was pretty caught up in being young and sober and social. And the guy started to unload the story of woe on me, and I said, "You know what? Can we do this later? I've got a date tonight with whatever I thought was more important than that at the time." And while that wasn't the only thing that sort of took me back out, I definitely look at that as sort of like the opening of the door to me going back out, to drinking. Um, I was asked to do something for the fellowship of AA, the fellowship that gave me everything in terms of sanity and freedom from addiction and all things positive. And I neglected that in favor of my own selfish interests. And in this case, going out and having a good time was more important than talking to someone about how they were struggling. And like I said, it wasn't like I didn't immediately drink, but over some time, I had some other things happening, and I couldn't figure out why all of a sudden I felt like drinking again, and I would talk about it in meetings, and I couldn't put my finger on it. And part of the solution would have been to have given away what was given to me, and I wasn't giving it away. And so, lesson learned. But I did have one more run out there, drinking. It was about 9 months, and I went as hard as I could. I didn't go to meetings. I didn't, I'm not one to like when I'm out there. I'm not one to like show up and whine about how I can't stop. You just won't see me. And then, usually the police are called, and and they're taking my belt and my shoestrings. But at any rate, at this time, that was the last time, at least so far, that that has happened to me. Uh, uh, when I came to in the psychiatric hospital, after I realized that I wasn't dead and being admitted into hell, which is sort of what my perception of that moment was. It's how crazy I was at the time. I came out, they let me out, and I saw my father, and I just had this whole sort of like whoosh feeling where it was like, and I'm done. And that was somewhere around February 16th, 17th, 1997. I claimed February 17th as my sobriety date. It may have been the next day. It probably kept me for about 10 days. And I was ready, I was ready to come out and do it again and do it the right way and do all of the things, right? And, I guess the lesson is that there's 12 steps for a reason. I try to find ways to work them all. And really, the easiest way to work all the 12 steps is to work the 12 step by working with someone and taking someone through the 12 step. And I've been very busy with that lately in my recovery. But, at that time, 25 years ago, I was just all in and ready to do whatever. I was ready to always put my recovery first, right? My recovery comes before my education. I went back to school and I got an education, and recovery comes before my relationships. And I've had lots of good ones, including healing my relationship with my parents in a lot of ways. And, my recovery comes before my job even. I would say, oh, maybe those things are on par, right? Like if I'm committed to being at work, I'm not going to not go to work in favor of a meeting or talking to someone. But immediately after, if I can reach out to the person who wants to talk about recovery, I will. And being a recovered person is part of that is being responsible at work and being a worker amongst other workers, and just you know giving of my time to the people that are paying me, which is something I could never do when I was, halfway holding down jobs and drinking. Um, my mind was always somewhere else, but I'm able to focus on my work today, and I'm always proud of that fact. And a lot of good things have come over the years from my involvement in AA and 12-step recovery, and I went back and I finished my college degree, and I have done some teaching at local schools here in Pittsburgh, and even my old high school. I have done a whole myriad of different kinds of jobs over the years. Recently, I was working in the film industry. And I think that, though, my experience with that has been that I will probably go back and just finish up my teaching certificate and become a full-time teacher, or I don't know. It's been an adventure, right? Like, so part of me wants to go teach English overseas. That's something I consider. Without a family, I'm free to do the things that I want to do, and free is that's the big word, right? So what I can sum up being sober as equaling freedom. Like, right, I have the freedom of choice. I could choose to drink, I suppose, but why would I do that? Because I don't need it. Has proven to be nothing but trouble for me, and the life that I have through 12-step recovery and the fellowship is happier and more exciting, and has been filled with more adventures than I could have ever imagined as somebody who was drinking. And my perception, I think it's part of the American perception, that like to have a good experience as an American, you need to be drinking, you need to be out at the bars, you need to be at the Super Bowls and the events and all those things, the concerts and whatnot. And there's always an association with drinking. And I found that I've experienced all those things that life has to offer without the drink, and it's been much more manageable and just as enjoyable, if not more enjoyable, sober. Um, and so, the adventure continues. I'm not sure where it leads next, but COVID happened and it led to the rooms of Zoom, where now I've been able to meet people like John in other parts of the country more easily, and made friends all over the country. I am heavily involved in 12-step recovery meetings and groups, and I have sponsees as far-flung as in far-flung places like Alaska and California, and I've never been more busy in giving it away, and you know that's very important to me. Like I said, that was probably, again, I see that as one of those things that is essential. Like I can't keep this if I don't give it away, and so I'm constantly trying to give back to the fellowship. I still go to in-person meetings here locally in Pittsburgh as well, and um, uh, yeah. And when AA asks something of me, I always say yes. If I can't do it right away, I do it as soon as possible. And when John asked me to be a part of the podcast, I knew that although my still have sometimes I feel like I don't want to do it. I'm like, but I do it because that's what keeps me grounded, keeps me humble. It reminds me of where I've been, and that I could, I'm only a drink away from going all the way back down uh, to the bottom rung of drunkenness and all of the other chaos that came with that. I am a real alcoholic. I cannot drink at all without serious consequences. If that's the hardest part about my life, then my life's not that hard. I have, as my grandmother would say, outside of my alcoholism, which is uh, under control right now, I have my health. And if you have your health, you have everything. And I'm super grateful for that. I'm super grateful for 12-step recovery and for the life I lead. And I'm grateful to John for asking me to share my experience, strength, and I believe I shared some hope as well. And yeah, if you're new, just keep coming back, go to meetings, get a sponsor, work the steps, become a part of the fellowship, and it'll work if you work it. That's all I have. I'm Mike. I'm an alcoholic. I pass.
Mike, fantastic, Mike, fantastic. And what is your sobriety date again?
Um, February 17th, 1997. So just over 25 years.
Fantastic. All right, sir. I really appreciate you doing this. How long have you known each other now? Over a year and a half. Not quite 2 years.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
All right,
So
sir.
I'm gonna have to keep showing up. I'm gonna start showing up to your Zoom room some more and get re-involved with that. So
Yeah,
appreciate you reaching out to me.
I scaled back on the meetings. The other meetings have moved to another room. But you'll catch me on Wednesday, Thursday, Fridays at 3:30 and 5 o'clock, and then the 8:15 meeting, 8:15 a.m. Eastern. We do 7 days a week, so you'll catch me there as well. Even if I'm working, I try to catch it.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, Mike. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks. Thanks so much, John. Talk to you soon.